This is the gentleman from California, Mr. Issa, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to pick up where my colleague from North Carolina left off. Dr. Koplow, and I will not describe you as anything other than a member of the party here, but since you seem to have concerns, let me run through a couple of quick questions. Do you know where the ambassador spends most of his, U.S. ambassador to Israel spends most of his time while he's in Israel?
In the past, ambassadors have spent their time in Tel Aviv, and having met with Ambassador Friedman a few weeks ago, it was done in Tel Aviv.
Well, that's interesting because I always see them at the King David, because as long as the Knesset is in session, that's where they live, right?
In the past, they have not lived in the King David every time the Knesset's in session, but I believe that the State Department keeps a residence in the King David for the ambassadors.
Exactly. The State Department keeps a residence for the ambassador at the King David and has for decades. Ambassador Gold, would you confirm that from your experience, that if you want to meet the ambassador in Jerusalem, that's pretty much the digs he has to meet you at, isn't it?
There has been an American facility in one of Jerusalem's hotels.
So, I stay at the King David by choice, so we'll just leave it as it's my favorite hotel in the city, Colony being a second. Now, having said that, the security at the King David is pretty good for a hotel. Ambassador Bolton, does it begin to meet the setbacks of safety, security for embassy personnel and the ambassador that are the minimum standards of today's embassies?
No, it doesn't even come close. And I can tell you from my own personal experience when I was in New York, these security questions are extremely important. And we don't need Benghazi to remind us of it. These are Americans who are doing their jobs for us, are at greater risk because of the travel necessity between Tel Aviv and Jerusalem now, because of the insecure facilities, and because of the lost opportunity of building more secure facilities in Jerusalem.
And Dr. Koplow, have you been in the consulate, the full consulate that exists in East Jerusalem that services mostly Palestinians?
I have not.
I have. It's a very large facility. Actually, it's embassy-esque in its setback and size. Have you been in the Consul General's compound, which is separate, in West Jerusalem?
No.
You know where the YMCA is over there?
Yes.
It's a block and a half away. Now, the interesting thing is the Consul General does maintain a facility and regularly, mostly heads in and out of the West Bank, if you will. And I personally think it's a good location because it allows him a very safe location no matter what may be happening in the West Bank. But in fact, they almost always on a daily basis go back and forth. What I find interesting is his facilities have significant setback considering it was once a private estate. The facility is permanent and has been expanded. The consulate that exists nearby is substantial and was built to modern standards. And yet today, as the Knesset meets in Jerusalem, the ambassador stays in temporary rented facilities at some location in Jerusalem and has no real proper place to conduct diplomatic business. So my question to you, Doctor, separate from the question of the term embassy for a moment, knowing that we have a facility for the Consul General, which is substantial, we have the actual consulate facility that does consular type work, particularly, visas and so on. Is there any reason that we should not have proper, safe facilities for the ambassador when he or she is going in and out of meetings with the government, which is substantially normally located in Jerusalem, at least when the Knesset is in session?
I think that would be a question for the State Department to decide. I think that in this case, the security concerns aren't about the facility itself. I think the security concerns are more about wider geopolitical security and the overall security situation in Jerusalem for Israelis.
Okay, so Congressman Juan Vargas, a former Jesuit priest, now a congressman, and myself have a bill that calls on the State Department to build a permanent and substantial facility to house safely the ambassador to Israel in or near Jerusalem for purposes of conducting the business of the American people before this nation. Do you inherently have any problem with that portion, if you will, with that sub-law? It doesn't say embassy. Do you have a problem with putting our ambassador in a safe location and in proximity to the government of Israel?
Without having seen the bill, I'm reluctant to.
Well, just take my description and I'll write it to match your agreement.
But I would say certainly in general I support anywhere the ambassador is, that facility should be secure.
Okay, so if I can summarize the chairman's indulgence, the one thing that this entire panel, I think, agrees based on head shaking is that the current government of Israel, of the Israeli people, is located in Jerusalem, that government regularly meets there, that the ambassador U.S. ambassador has an obligation to regularly be there and is there regularly, that ambassador is not currently in facilities that meet the Inman or other common standards of security, nor does it have the ability to host people in the way that ambassadors normally do at the embassy, that the embassy in Tel Aviv, sitting on, by the way, the other side of it's sitting on the ocean, it's beautiful, but it's also not protectable, that facility is dated and by definition doesn't meet the standards. And so regardless of the president's decision on the question of moving the embassy, we have a facility deficit, a security deficit that needs to be corrected, and the logical place to secure the ambassador for most of the time is in a city where he currently does not have permanent U.S. facilities. I think that's what I heard everyone shaking their head for. So as the president decides this question, he's really deciding the question of safety of diplomats and security and our country's ability to do business with the with the government of Israel. Is that one we can all agree on, even though I saw...
Gentleman's time's expired.
I know, but I'm going for that long agreement, Chairman.
I know. I mean,
can I get a yes?
I gave you some indulgence, so we got to go, because I know Brian Mass has got to move on, so I want to recognize him for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman, for the invitation to join your committee today. This has been a much-needed hearing. I'm going to ask just some very self-evident questions because this is such a self-evident issue, at least in my opinion. So I'll just start at the end down here. Mr. Kintorovich, can you tell me, what is the capital of the United States of America?
The capital is Washington, D.C., of course.
Certainly. And Dr. Kaplow, in what U.S. city does Egypt maintain their embassy?
Washington, D.C.
That's exactly right. We maintain ours in Cairo. Mr. Klein, I'm sure you know the city in which, the U.S. city in which Jordan maintains their embassy.
It could have been in Jerusalem. They chose Amman.
That's where we maintain our embassy.
Correct.
They maintain their embassy here in Washington, D.C. Certainly, Ambassador Gold, I'm sure you know where Saudi Arabia here in the United States maintains their embassy.
They maintain their embassy in the center of American power and influence, the capital of the United States, Washington, D.C.
You better believe it. And we maintain ours in Riyadh. Ambassador Bolton, I'm certain that you can say where Israel and 177 other nations maintain their embassies here in the United States of America.
Turns out to be Washington.
That's exactly right. So I guess short of invasion, I really can't think of a bigger slap in the face to any nation's sovereignty, their right to self-government, their legitimacy, than not recognizing their capital or their center of government. I think that us not celebrating having an embassy in Jerusalem, having the presence there, our diplomatic mission in Israel, having it there, I think it's absolutely a slight to our greatest of allies every single day. So in that, I'm going to keep my remarks very brief and just say this. We are the leader of the free world. That is an undisputed fact, and rightly so. So we need to be calling on every person in this town, every person in this building to lead and establish our embassy in the center of freedom in the Middle East, and that is the true capital of Israel, Jerusalem. Thank you for the opportunity to be here, Chairman, and I yield back.
Yield the balance of your time to me.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, I thank the gentleman. I just wanted to thank the witnesses for your testimony. I think we've gotten a lot of very good information. I think it was presented very crisply. And I just come away from the hearing more convinced than ever that we need to follow this 1995 law. I'd love to do it before the end of the year to coincide with the 50th anniversary of Jerusalem's reunification during the Six-Day War. But I think from a security perspective, it makes sense. I think from the religious freedom perspective, the endorsement of Israeli stewardship over those religious sites is something that's very important both here, there, and I think throughout the world. And I think geopolitically, people will see that America is standing with a close ally, and that's exactly what we need to be doing at this point in time. The record will remain open for 2 weeks for any member to submit a written opening statement or questions for the record. And if there is no further business, without objection, the National Security Subcommittee stands adjourned.